What if someone could influence your decision without threatening you, bribing you, or even telling you what to do? What if a simple request, a small favor, or the order in which someone speaks to you could subtly change the way you respond? You might think you are completely in control of your decisions, and most of the time you are. But the human mind is not a perfectly logical machine. We use shortcuts, we respond to social pressure, we look for consistency in our own behavior. And sometimes, without realizing it, these psychological patterns can influence what we say, what we buy, who we trust, and even how we feel about other people. Today, we're going to explore several fascinating psychological effects that can influence human behavior. But there's an important warning. These techniques do not work on everyone, every time. They are not magical mind control tricks, and understanding them doesn't give you the power to control another person's mind. Instead, think of them as psychological patterns that can sometimes influence decisions under the right circumstances. And once you understand them, you may start noticing them everywhere. The first one is called the door-in-the-face technique. Imagine someone walks up to you and says, "Would you be willing to volunteer for 3 months, every weekend, completely for free?" You immediately say no. The request sounds enormous. Then the person suddenly changes their approach. "Okay, what about just one afternoon?" That second request feels completely different. You might still say no, but compared with 3 months, one afternoon suddenly seems small. And that's the basic idea behind the door-in-the-face technique. A person begins with a large request that is likely to be rejected. Then they make a smaller request. The smaller request is the one they actually wanted you to accept. Why can this sometimes work? One explanation is reciprocity. When someone appears to make a concession for us, we may feel pressure to make a concession in return. There's also the contrast between the two requests. After hearing something enormous, the smaller request can appear much more reasonable. But here's where things become important. The technique isn't guaranteed. The relationship between the people, the size of the request, the timing, and the situation can all influence the outcome. So if someone asks you for something ridiculous and then immediately asks for something smaller, don't automatically assume you're being manipulated. But do notice the pattern. Because recognizing the technique gives you something extremely valuable: time to think. You can simply ask yourself, would I have agreed to this smaller request if the first request had never happened? If the answer is no, you've just discovered something interesting about how the situation influenced your decision. Now let's move to something even stranger. Imagine that you don't particularly like someone. Maybe you think they're annoying. Maybe you don't trust them. Then one day they ask you for a small favor. "Can you help me carry this?" You agree, nothing dramatic happens. But afterwards, something strange may happen in your mind. You may begin seeing that person slightly differently. This connects to the Ben Franklin effect. The idea is that sometimes doing a favor for someone can be associated with increased liking or positive feelings toward that person. The concept is commonly linked to Benjamin Franklin, who described asking a political rival to lend him a rare book. After the favor, Franklin said the man became more willing to help him again and that their relationship improved. But the psychology behind the phenomenon is more complicated than the popular version suggests. One possible explanation involves cognitive dissonance. When our actions and beliefs don't fit together comfortably, our minds sometimes try to reduce that inconsistency. Imagine thinking, "I don't really like this person," then behaving like, "I just helped this person." Those two things don't perfectly match. Your brain may attempt to make the situation feel more consistent. Maybe, perhaps they're not so bad after all, and suddenly your attitude has shifted a little. But again, this isn't a guaranteed psychological hack. Helping someone doesn't automatically make you like them. The circumstances matter, your existing relationship matters, and the favor itself matters. Still, the principle reveals something fascinating about human behavior. Sometimes our actions can influence our feelings, just as our feelings influence our actions. And that's where psychology gets really interesting, because we like to imagine that our emotions always control our behavior. But sometimes our behavior can come first, and our brain creates an explanation afterward. Now consider another situation. Someone tells you, "Only 5 spaces are left." You suddenly feel more interested. Or, "This offer expires tonight." Now you feel pressure to decide. Or, "Everyone is buying this." And suddenly you wonder whether you should buy it too. These examples connect to several psychological principles involving scarcity and social influence. When something appears limited, people may perceive it as more valuable. Why? Because humans naturally pay attention to opportunities that seem like they could disappear. But scarcity can also be manufactured. A salesperson doesn't necessarily need to say, "You need this." They can simply create the feeling, "You might lose your chance." And now you're no longer asking, "Do I actually want this?" You're asking, "What if I miss out?" That's a very different question. This is why urgency can be powerful. When people believe they have plenty of time, they're more likely to deliberate. When they believe the opportunity is disappearing, they may make faster decisions. So whenever someone tells you, "Decide right now," pause, ask, "Why do I need to decide right now?" If the answer is simply because someone wants to create pressure, taking a step back can restore your ability to think clearly. Now let's talk about something that happens constantly in everyday life: social proof. Imagine walking through two restaurants. One is almost completely empty. The other has a long line outside. Which one looks better? You might automatically assume the crowded restaurant has better food, but you don't actually know that. Maybe the empty restaurant just opened. Maybe the crowded restaurant has terrible service. Or maybe people simply saw the line and assumed, "Everyone else must know something I don't." That's social proof. When we're uncertain, we often look at what other people are doing for clues about what we should do. This can be useful. Humans are social creatures, and other people's behavior can provide valuable information. But it can also be exploited. Advertisements can show crowds. Social media can show thousands of likes. Influencers can tell you, "Everyone is using this." And suddenly popularity becomes evidence of quality. But popularity and quality are not the same thing. A million people believing something doesn't automatically make it true. And a product having thousands of reviews doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. So when you see, "Everyone is doing it," ask, "Is everyone actually doing it?" And more importantly, "Would I want this if nobody else were doing it?" That question can be surprisingly powerful. Now let's go even deeper. There's another psychological pattern that affects almost everyone: commitment and consistency. People generally prefer their actions and beliefs to appear consistent with one another. If you publicly tell everyone, "I'm going to exercise every morning," you may feel additional pressure to actually exercise, not because someone is forcing you, but because changing your behavior creates an uncomfortable contradiction. You said one thing. Now you want your actions to match it. This can be useful. You can use commitment to build good habits. But other people can also use it to pressure you. Imagine someone asks, "Do you agree that helping people is important?" You say yes. Then they ask, "Then you should help me with this." Now the second request is connected to something you already agreed with. You might feel pressure to remain consistent. Again, this doesn't mean you have to say yes. You can change your mind. You can disagree with the connection. And you can say, "I agree with the principle, but that doesn't mean I have to agree to this particular request." That distinction is important, because one of the strongest defenses against manipulation is understanding that you are allowed to change your mind. You don't owe consistency at the expense of your own judgment. Now think about the last time someone gave you a compliment before asking you for something. Maybe, "You're always such a helpful person." Then, "Could you do me a small favor?" That compliment may feel good, but it can also create social pressure. You may start thinking, "If I say no, am I being unhelpful?" This is where persuasion can cross into manipulation. The difference isn't always obvious. Persuasion happens constantly in normal human interaction. We persuade friends to watch a movie. Parents persuade children to study. Businesses persuade customers to buy products. Persuasion itself isn't automatically bad. The problem begins when someone deliberately exploits your vulnerabilities, hides important information, creates unreasonable pressure, or attempts to bypass your ability to make a free and informed decision. And that's why understanding psychology shouldn't be about becoming better at controlling people. It should also be about becoming harder to control. The next time someone makes you an unusually large request, remember the door-in-the-face technique. The next time you suddenly feel closer to someone after helping them, remember the Ben Franklin effect. When something is presented as rare or available for only a limited time, remember scarcity. When everyone appears to be doing something, remember social proof. And when someone reminds you of something you previously agreed to before making another request, remember commitment and consistency. None of these principles means you're being controlled. They simply remind you that human decisions are influenced by context. And knowing that context exists gives you an advantage. Because the goal isn't to become paranoid. You don't need to walk around believing that everyone is manipulating you. That would be another mistake. Instead, develop a habit of pausing before important decisions. Ask yourself, do I actually want this? Would I still choose this if I had more time? Am I agreeing because I believe it's the right decision? Or am I agreeing because I feel pressured? And perhaps the most important question, if nobody knew what I was going to choose, what would I choose? That question removes something powerful, the pressure to perform for other people. Psychology doesn't reveal secret buttons that allow you to control human beings. People are far too complicated for that. But psychology can reveal patterns. Patterns in how we respond to requests. Patterns in how we interpret other people's behavior. Patterns in how we make decisions. And once you recognize those patterns, you become more aware of the forces influencing you. So the next time someone makes you an offer that seems impossible to refuse, don't immediately say yes. Don't immediately say no either. Pause, think, and make the decision yourself. Because the most useful psychological trick isn't learning how to manipulate other people. It's learning how to recognize when someone is trying to manipulate you. Understand the mind, question the influence, and always think for yourself.